Before the sin of the Eitz Hadas, tree of knowledge, Adam in his own right had no impurity in him. All that was lacking was his level to achieve perfection. And if he would have chosen correctly to restrain and not eat of the tree of knowledge, he would have risen to the level of perfection. He would have met his challenge, and he would become a total spiritual being, which is meant to happen at the time of the coming Mashiach, or even in the new world, the new existence. However, because he allowed evil to be part of his being, although the action now in its ability, it has the ability to spiritualize the person, and the effect should be obvious, but because we have this impurity within the person, it doesn't allow the action to fully filter and touch the being to be totally spiritualized. I'll give you an example. You have a projectile, it has a certain velocity, and it has a certain ability. And if you aim it at a wall, it'll pulverize that wall, turn it to dust. Why? Because the wall doesn't have the strength to repel it, so it will destroy the wall. What about if I build that wall of material that's impregnable material? Even though that projectile has that velocity, the same velocity, but because now it has to penetrate another type of material, which is impregnable, it may dent it. It may penetrate it to a degree, but it can't destroy it. Before Adam ate of the tree of knowledge, his body had all the capacity that if he would have done the right thing to suppress and not eat the tree of knowledge, it would have created a spiritual energy which would have totally spiritualized him. Of course, he had the capacity to be fully spiritualized. But now, because he has intermingled and intermeshed in his being this evil, so the result of the action has the same energy, but the energy cannot infiltrate and penetrate and be absorbed fully in his being because of the evil that exists within his being. So the after effect is not the same after effect any longer, because the being itself has all these obstructions and blockages that the absorption is no longer the same. Therefore, the person cannot be spiritualized. And now it's a new challenge, because the effect of our actions no longer have that immediate effect on us that was spiritualized. That's the understanding. And this is all based, of course, on the concept that when we do a mitzvah, it generates a spiritual energy, an overwhelming level of spiritual energy. And when you transgress, you sin, it creates a negative energy. And the negative energy has a representation of evil. That's evil. And brings you to do more evil, perpetrate evil. You're addicted to that. You're drawn to that, and when you do some positive, you're drawn to do more positive. But the effect of that positive cannot manifest itself in this existence versus the person. And this is, we mentioned, this is detached from this existence, and it's put in a holding pattern. It's called the soul world. And when a person dies and the soul departs from the body, and the soul is only the soul, now the soul could be spiritualized in the soul world with that energy which was removed from this existence and is waiting there to penetrate his soul. And when it penetrates the soul, on that plane, the soul is fully spiritualized, magnified to a level that it's unfathomable because it's in spiritual realm. Can you go just one moment, please? We discussed yesterday that this world was created with such precision that there's nothing which is superfluous in this existence. At one time, based on the concept of evolution, the man evolved from a one-cell animal and just evolved. There's certain things in the human body which no longer have any value in this new state of function. First, they believed at one time the thymus gland was something left over from a previous iteration of existence before we evolved into a human being. They believed at one time tonsils were something left over. They're not necessary. Just in recent years, in past 40 years, they realized that there's nothing superfluous in the body. Everything that exists in the body is crucial and essential for the function of the body. As I said, everything is precise because it didn't evolve, but rather was created to be that, and creation is perfect, is precise. That's what it is. And as a result of that, if this world was created to be the place of challenge, that means everything that exists in this world has a purpose and value to ultimately bring about God's glory, because if you turn it down or if you utilize it as it's meant to be utilized, then you're doing God's will. That means the world is facilitating your objective to create that perfection within the spiritual realm. But you'd say, there's so many things in this world. You have herbs, you have trees, you have fruit-bearing trees, you have inanimate, you have endless things in this world, so seemingly of different ilk, different makeup, no commonality, and somehow all this is for God's glory. How could this be for God's glory? So Ramchal writes, it's so profound and so deep that at a certain level, all this connects. And they're all components to weave this tapestry, this mosaic of God's glory. How every one is necessary somehow to bring that about. Each one in its own right, he says, doesn't achieve perfection. But after each one complements and supplements the other, in the totality of existence, the way existence functions, it's what that achieves, that totality allows the human being to achieve and to utilize it to achieve his own personal level of perfection. And I was thinking, this morning, I once said that Chazal say that we have 248 positive commandments. We have 248 parts to the body. You have 248 components to the soul. We find that there are 12 tribes of the Jewish people. The spiritual infrastructure of the Jews are 12. So the Midrash says, why are there 12 hours in the day and 12 hours at night? Because they're 12 tribes. Why the 12 months in a year? Because they're 12 tribes. Why the 12 sides to the zodiac? It's because they're 12 tribes. Meaning wherever you look in existence, it reflects the existence of the Jewish people. What is the spiritual profile of the Jewish people? 12. Meaning because all that exists for the sake of the Jewish people, because this is the playing field to be tested, so everything reflects the 12, which is the infrastructure of the Jewish people. So why the 248 parts to the body? Because that body has to facilitate the challenge of 248 positive commandments. Now, we have 365 negative commandments, which The Chazal, the Minchas tells us, corresponds to the solar calendar because the rotation of the earth is 365. So you'd say it's a mnemonic. If you want to know how many negative commandments we have, to remember 365, the 365 days in the solar calendar. So the Maharal explains what does 365 represent in the solar calendar? It represents the rotation of the earth. So when we speak about order on the absolute level in existence, if the world would go off its axis and not maintain that order of rotation, 365, what would happen to existence? It would self-destruct. So when we speak about order on that absolute level, how is it depicted? The number is 365. How does a Jew maintain the order of his spirituality, not to compromise his spirituality? If you live within the context of 365, not crossing the lines, then you retain the wholesomeness of the spirituality that you're endowed with. If you cross those lines, you're compromising it. So how does one maintain the order of your being, of your essence, of the soul? 365 negative commandments. So because 365 represents order. That's the Maharal. It's just not a mnemonic, but rather it's literally the same thing. It's order. That's the number of order. Now the question is, let's look at the other way. Why did God choose the rotation of the earth, of the solar calendar, to be 365? You know why? Because the 365 negative commandments. It's the other way. It's not what you're saying, just as there, that's order, this is order. No. The reason why God chose 365 in terms of the solar calendar, in terms of the rotation, that's reflecting what is the order of the spirituality of the Jew. Not to violate 365 negative commandments. That's how you maintain and retain order. How do you maintain the world which is dependent on them, on the Jewish people? 365. As the 12 reflects 12 months, 12 hours, this order reflects the profile of the spiritual profile of the Jewish people. The 365 of the solar represents the order of existence because that is the order of the Jew. It's the other way. So just as the body is one entity and every part of the body, each one complements the other, the world reflects the need to facilitate all aspects of the Jewish person, of the Jewish soul. So just as in the body, if you don't understand the anatomy and the physiology of the human body and the pathology, you don't understand how this all interacts and everyone complements and energizes and allows the other to function as it functions within the systems that are within the body, identically, things which seem to be unrelated, they all are very related. How do you connect them? What does gases have to do with inanimate? What does inanimate have to do with human life? What does human life have to do with vegetation? Somehow we could concoct something, come up with something, but it's much more than that. There is a direct correlation and interaction, intermeshing, that each one at a certain level is necessary to create the totality of existence for that purpose. I'm paraphrasing Ramchal's words, except he didn't say what I said about the 365. It's the other way. It's only 365 because the Jew has the numbers 365 to maintain the orderliness of his spirituality, that it should not be compromised. He quotes the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which is this week's chapter. All that God created in his world, Loboro, Lobro el Chodo. It was all created for his glory. What does this mean? Every aspect of existence has a purpose. It doesn't say ma, koma. All that was created in existence is for his glory. Positive, we understand. Even the negative. His glory is that you actually are dedicated not to violate his will. So not violate, that's his glory. There's a Rav Chaim Volozhin writes, we find that Adam, before God created his female counterpart, he passed all the species before Adam, all life. And the Torah tells us he called all the living species by name. The domesticated, the undomesticated, the birds. Each one was identified by name by Adam. After he named all of them, he realized he had no mate. When he came to the realization that every species has a mate and he has no mate, then he created, it says this deep sleep came upon him, this deep trance, and God took the appendage and created his wife. Chava, Eve was created. What does it mean? He sees the way they look, what they are has no relevance to him. They're not human. They're unintelligible. So what does it mean? After he named the names of the various species of life, he realized he had no counterpart. And only then, when he came to the realization and he's in need of one, God created for him. What did Adam, when he named the various living species, what was included in that name? Was it just putting a tag to identify you by number? You have 1 through 20 million, whichever number, that's what you represent. No. So Chaim Volozhin explains that before Adam ate of the tree of knowledge, it said he saw from one end of the world to the other. There was nothing that was obscured from his understanding. Nothing was occluded. He had an absolute understanding of all creation, how all aspects of creation interact, complement, and supplement one another. So, for instance, he says, I'm quoting Rav Chaim Volozhin, when he looked at the eagle in Hebrew is called Nesher. Nesher, Nun Shin Resh. That's Nesher. So he says, when he saw that Nesher, not only did he see just its physicality, he understood the significance, why that bird exists, why that bird is the so-called the king of the birds. No bird flies the way the eagle. Its strength, its power, its wingspan, its plumage, its internal organs. He understood every aspect. When he looked at that, nothing was occluded. It says he was able to see from one end of the world to another. There was no blockage. So when he named it Nesher, if you were able to decipher that word, that name, in that name is included every aspect of the makeup of that bird in the physical sense, its spiritual representation, and how it fits into the puzzle, why God created it. That lies in the word Nesher. And when he saw the lion, and he called the lion Ari, which is the lion in Hebrew, in that word lies every aspect of the lion, his physicality, its purpose in creation, and how it fits in and relates to everything else in creation. So if you would be able to decipher and unlock the secrets within that word Ari, you'd understand many things that today or anytime, very rarely did anybody have that level of understanding. But Adam, being the first creation, having this unlimited, unhindered understanding of existence, terrestrial, celestial, everything, he was able to name that animal or species, and within that name is that. As a result of that, since he understood that species to its core on every level, and it's playing within existence, he realized then, he understood who he was. He has no relevance to all these species at any level, because he understood those species to the core of their being. When he came to the realization that what they represent and what he represents, more than worlds apart, God says, now it's time to create a mate for you. And when he created her and he saw Chava, what does he say? Etzem me'atzamai. You're a bone of my bones, you're a flesh of my flesh. Therefore, you'll be mother of all men, of all creation. You're the mother of all life, because the woman, the human being, is the center of the universe. Everything was created to complement and to facilitate the objective of the human being. And Chava herself is the helpmate, the counterpart of Adam, to assist him in that objective. Therefore, he named the Chava. Vav and Yud are interchanged. Chayo. She is the mother of all life. Ein kol chai. She's the mother of all life. She is that representation. Because all life, all existence is only there to facilitate their objective. That's the understanding. So even when he saw Chava, he understood her. What exactly, why does she look, her physical shape, her internal organs, her reproductive organs, her chemistry, everything is different than the man. But it's within the realm of humanity. And he understood what that was. This is pre-sin. Once he ate of the tree of knowledge, it's like a person has these mini strokes. And the person doesn't realize every time he has one of those mini strokes or these events, his brain functions to a lesser degree. He has lesser degrees of clarity. He forgets certain things. He was eating shut him down. He was shut down. Spiritually, he was shut down. He became more of a physical person. Within physicality, you're more finite. You no longer see from one end of the world to another. You've lost that ability because you're no longer functioning as that spiritual being. You're functioning as that physical being now, because you ingested the evil of the tree of knowledge for that reason. The Talmud tells us, there's a medrash in this week's parsha that says, if the nations of the world would only know the value of the Jews, they would take legions of soldiers to protect us. Because even the rains that fall, the vegetation that grows, that's all in the merit of the Jew. If not for the Jew, the world wouldn't exist. So rather than having that level of appreciation, they tried to destroy us. But at the end of time, when God will purge existence from all evil, and that clarity will come to all mankind, and then they will realize the value of the Jew, they're all going to gravitate to the Jew to assist him in his objective. It's only now, because there's evil, they're blindsided. They don't see it. They don't appreciate it. And as a result of that, the process is totally off. And they see it as a threat, or they see it as a detriment in their existence. It's very interesting. There's the anti-Semitic work. It's called the Protocols of Zion. And this already has been spoken about in the early part of the 20th century, even the later part of the 19th century. There's a world conspiracy that a handful of Jews want to control all existence. That's what they want to do. And therefore, the world would not allow it. Jews have the tentacles all over and they're orchestrating. That's the protocols of Zion. It's interesting. I'm not getting political. Of course, we have a certain person who has a certain Achilles heel for political, not me. Soros. There's no area in politics or within the function of this country that he does not have his hand in. He put his money all over. Not talking about good, bad, he put his money all over. And his influences, you can't imagine over the years, the influence that he created and his perspective and what he wants, literally. He shut this country down from behind the scenes. But I'm not talking about him. If factually speaking, all existence exists only because of the Jewish people. And everything that exists is to facilitate their objective. How does that manifest itself in the minds and the emotion of the nations of the world? It reigns because of the Jew. The Jew's in control. Things thrive because of the Jewish people. So the Jewish people are connected to every aspect of existence. Whatever happens, they have the hand in it. We don't. Hands-on, we're not hands-on. But reality-wise, why does God will that should exist? Only because it fits into the equation of what the Jew needs to advance his spirituality. Why does the world regress? Because of the Jew. Because the Jew didn't merit, was not sufficiently worthy for God to will that for him. So isn't the Jew running the world? Even though in actuality, what they believe is something else. There's a cabal. There's this conspiracy behind the scenes where they're all a bunch of, we're the puppeteers and we're pulling the strings. No. But since the reality is that is the truth, the way they process it, that's what's happening. And that's the cause of anti-Semitism. The Jew has an ulterior motive. You can't trust them. You never know what they're up to. And that's the protocols of Zion. Only at the end of time, the Chovos HaLevavos, duties of heart, explains something with a phenomenal allegory. There was this king, and there was nothing he couldn't provide for his son. And he said to his son, I need to build you a palace, one of a kind, in beauty, in material, quality material, in amenities, everything's going to be there. It's going to be a miniature of my palace. And the son is very excited. And when it was built, there were sconces on the wall to put torches that when you walk in, because since there's so many different levels and it's made of marble, it's stone, if you fall, you can be injured very seriously. So you have to so-called illuminate the palace. The son, as they said, he was lucky his father was born before him. And he goes into the palace and he figures he could feel his way through the palace. He walks through the front door. He doesn't realize there are 3 steps or 4 steps. He misses the step, he falls, and he has a semi-concussion. He hits his head in the stone. He's already starting to murmur under his breath. What did my father build for me? He built for me a death trap. I come in, first thing I sustain this kind of injury. Keeps going, he's walking in the dark. And again, it's multi-leveled. He falls into a pool, nearly drowns. He's getting really upset at his father. What's my father trying to do for me? Here, this was supposed to be the ultimate. Look what's going on. By the time he finished an hour and a half, the man really, he was fit. He had to be rehabilitated. He broke his bones. He had this concussion. He has a gash over his eye. He needs full medical treatment. So, and they hear him moaning and groaning. He can't get off the floor. Somebody comes in and says, "What's the problem?" He says, "My father created this monstrosity here for me, which nearly took my life." So the person says to the prince, the scout says, "Why don't you light them? And you'll see what's going on here. And we would have prevented it all." He says, "It was a good idea." He lights it, and he sees a palace to be held. He sees beauty and things you can't imagine what his father created for him, built for him. But he, fool, you had the lights out, you walk in, you go head first. Therefore, you sustain all these injuries. But if you would have illuminated the palace, you'd see the value of every aspect of the palace and how it all, there's a theme, and how everything accommodates everything else. And there's nothing lacking in this palace. But you have to have the lights on. This world, if you haven't understand what it is, there's nothing lacking in this world. Everything is at the utmost level. Blessing beyond your imagination. Nothing's been left out. Every T crossed, every I dotted. Perfect. Why don't we see it? Because we're blind. Our conflicts of interest don't allow us to see it. But there's an illuminator. The illuminator is called the Torah. The Jews, unfortunately, you can have the best spectacles in the world. If you don't put them on, you don't see. You have to engage in it. And when you engage in it, you have to wear them properly. You have to have the right intent. And you have to be committed, a level of belief and dedication. All of a sudden, things start making sense. That's the difference. So what seems to be disparate, separate, no relevance, it's one entity that functions as a homogeneous entity, that one complements and supplements the other.